109, call us to the order. Please join me in the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda this evening?
We do have a number of addenda. Under F, under recommendation actions, under new business, O, information available, Renaissance Learning, approved contracting with Renaissance Learning for STAR accelerated reading licenses for the 24-25 school year in a total amount of $26,967.37. Also in addition, letter R, information available, Great Minds, approved purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of Eureka math materials in a total amount of $38,579.28. Letter S, more information available, Pearson Ames Web, approved contracting with Pearson for Ames Web Plus complete subscriptions for the 24-25 school year in the amount of $6,300. Letter double E, consider approval of offering a contract for half-time district gifted and talented coordinator. Recommendation is to approve offering a contract to Lacey Krakow as the half-time district gifted and talented coordinator for the 24-25 school year. Double F, consider approval of offering a contract for district work-based learning coordinator. Recommendation, approve offering a contract to Kim Russell as the district work-based learning coordinator for the 24-25 school year pending certification. Double G, consider approval of math pilot for Algebra 1 at Lingo Fort Laramie High School. Recommendation, approve piloting Algebra 1 from Eureka Math Square 2 at Lingo Fort Laramie High School for the 24-25 school year, and the purchase of teacher and student curricular materials from Great Minds in the amount of $1,139.50, and is being paid by ESSER funds.
Okay, thank you. We now need to adopt the agenda with the addendum. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented this evening, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, we will now move down to information proposal. We don't have anything this evening. So letter D, public forum, please keep in mind there's a 5-minute time limit. And Mr. Tony Mueller.
This is on. Okay, there we go. Superintendent Kramer, Mr. Chairman, trustees, thank you for your time. Thank you for your service. I'm going to begin here. Ever since a few meetings ago, we had a discussion about Franklin Covey and what exactly they were offering. And we were all in agreement that they were, well, you were all in agreement that they were offering a curriculum that did not include DEI, that DEI, as far as they were concerned, had only to do with their corporate statement, just like Coca-Cola, Amazon, so on. I've had some interaction with them, and I believe that you guys were sincere when you told us that. Unfortunately, that was misrepresented to you. The proof is in front of you. Teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion through the 7 habits. I surprisingly got a response from Franklin Covey from their main office when I asked them, hey, could you please clarify what this is about? Because we were told this was not the case. If you read their email, and I shared with you both the email that I sent them and their response, and I'll just hit the high spots here. They've been doing this for 40 years. I mean, I thought of Barbara Mandrell. We were commie before commie was cool. This is what they do. And then they go on to say that for the last 10 years, they've introduced DEI to hundreds of thousands of students, and they're glad that they're doing it. So here's the problem. They are not allowed to misrepresent to you, to our superintendent, what it is they're providing, especially when there's a grant involved. So the third page is the fact that not only is it immoral for them to misrepresent what they offered to this district, which is ironic considering that this district is represented by a senator who led the fight against DEI at the University of Wyoming. I wonder if they knew that and figured maybe this wasn't the environment where that would be popular. That's a total guess on my part. But it's not only immoral for them to misrepresent that, it's against the law, it turns out. If it's a federal grant, it's 18 U.S. Code 1031. If it's a state, there'll be a sister statute and state law that would prevent them from doing that. There'd be some civil and criminal penalties for them misrepresenting that because there's grant money involved. So that being said, as far as them violating the law, I don't expect you guys to look into that. That's my hobby. I like to go after Marxists. It's what I do in my spare time. So I'll look into that. All I'm asking you to do is to reconsider your vote to approve this curriculum now that it's obvious that it's not what they were presenting. And if this last part sounds like a criticism, it is a little bit. This is the second time we've had to bring to your attention a vendor offering curriculum that plays footsie with Marxists. I get it. This agenda is insanely long. I cannot believe that the amount of things that you guys try to take on, but you have got to be vigilant because these guys are slick, they're smooth, and they want our kids. The spirits and souls of our children are sacred and holy. You must suspect everyone that would approach that and be vigilant in who would even begin to approach that. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Letter E, recommended actions. Number 1, it's the consent agenda. Are there any items any member wishes to pull from the agenda this evening? Hearing none, you have a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda presented this evening, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? And it carries. Number 2, old business. Letter A, consider approval of proposed revisions to District Policy 5131.21, elementary district-wide discipline consequences as presented on second and final reading. The recommendation is to approve the proposed revisions to District Policy 5131.21, elementary district-wide discipline consequences as presented on second and final reading. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving proposed revisions to District Policy 5131.21, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter B, consider approval of proposed revision to District Policy 5131.7, interscholastic athletics and school activities as presented on second and final reading. The recommendation is to approve the proposed revision to District Policy 5131.7, interscholastic athletics and school activities as presented on second and final reading. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving proposed revision to District Policy 5131.7, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Number 3, new business. Letter A, consider approval of offering contracts for the 24-25 school year. The recommendation is to approve offering teaching contracts to Kyle Pierce as a secondary reading interventionist at Torrington Middle School, to Sydney Sharp as a special education teacher at Lingle Fort Laramie Middle School and High School, and to Jade Reinhardt as a half-time academic interventionist pending certification for the 24-25 school year. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of offering contracts for the 24-25 school year to Kyle Pierce, Sydney Sharp, and Jade Reinhardt, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter B, consider acceptance of late certified staff resignations. The recommendation is to accept the resignations submitted by Trail Elementary special education teacher Lee Patrick at Torrington Middle School and math teacher Jason Dias, effective as of May 24th, 2024. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting late certified staff resignations from Katie Patrick and Jason Dias, as effective as of May 24th, 2024, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter C, consider approval of contracting for the demolition of the THS Tech Ed building in the Little House. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Vivens Construction for the demolition of the THS Tech Ed building in the Little House in the amount of $90,872. $76,250 were funded by will be funded by school activities, capital construction, and $14,622 funded by major maintenance. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, kind of the same way with the asbestos removal too, as you can see that process going underway right now. The ironic thing is, this is less than what the asbestos removal from those buildings are, so, yeah. We were actually very pleased with the bids that we did receive in regards to affordability and where we were at in regards to funding.
Well, the other thing that I would share with you is the little house, we're just putting gravel back in where that's at. And where the tech ed building is, that's going back in its company. So that will be slightly different. And they anticipate the foundation to be more significant on the tech ed.
And that's really a nice space there as we get that tech in the building for a lot of the activities that we have out there also. And even do have the availability for some outdoor learning space too.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of contracting for demolition of the THS Tech Ed building in the Little House in the total amount of $90,872, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter D, consider approval of building portions of student handbooks. The recommendation is to approve the 24-25 student handbooks as presented from Trail Elementary, Lingle Elementary, Lingle Middle and High School, Southeast Schools, and Grange Elementary, and handbooks will be emailed to the board. Do I have a motion?
One thing before the motion, Southeast was inadvertently placed on that list. Theirs is not on that list, just so you're aware. So the motion would include to not have Southeast, and those other schools will have those in July.
I move to approve the building portions of student handbooks.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving building portions of student handbooks for Trail Elementary, Lingle Elementary, Lingle Middle and High School, and LaGrange Elementary, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? It carries. Letter E, consider approval of proposed revisions to District Policy 4140, certified and professional staff fringe benefits as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions to District Policy 4140 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving proposed revisions to District Policy 4140, certified as professional staff fringe benefits as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter F, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4150, certified and professional staff leaves and absences, as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions to district policy 4150 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving proposed revisions to district policy 4150, certifying professional staff leaves and absences, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter G, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4230, classified fringe benefits, as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions to district policy 4230 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving proposed revisions to district policy 4230, classified fringe benefits as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter H, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4240, classified staff leaves and absences as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions to district policy 4230 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving proposed revisions to district policy 4240, classified staff leaves and absences as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter I, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4330, medical leave bank, as presented on introduction and first reading. Recommendation is to approve the proposed revisions to district policy 4330 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving revisions to district policy 4330, medical leave bank, as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter J, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 4301, special education endorsement agreement, as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the revisions to district policy 4301 to be renumbered to 4175 and as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving revisions to district policy 4301, special education endorsement agreement as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter K, consider approval of proposed new district policy 4275, special education specialist assistant certificate agreement as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the new proposed district policy 4275 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I know this was discussed in salary relations, but is there guidance from the state on what certificates we can acknowledge or how that works? Or if that would be just. If we're acknowledging, this is the, so we're just acknowledging the position for the districts?
Explain, I guess, tell me more about that question.
Well, so we made a position, so we have this, the state giving guidance on certificates.
Yes.
Creating a certificate.
No.
For this.
No, it's okay. I got you in the end, so thank you for that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving revisions to District Policy 4301 Special Education Endorsement Agreement as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter K, consider approval of proposed new District Policy 4275 Special Education Specialist Assistant Certificate Agreement as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the new proposed District Policy 4275 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
I so moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
That's why you're confused. I don't know that. I was afraid.
All those in favor of approving new District Policy 4275 Special Education Specialist Assistant Certificate Agreement as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter L, consider approval of proposed revisions to policy 5131.22, student conduct, concise activity rules, grades 6 through 12, as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the proposed revisions to district policy 5131.22, as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving revisions to policy 5131.22, student conduct, concise activity rules, grades 6 through 12, as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter N, consider approval of proposed new district policy 1200, parental rights, as presented on introduction and first reading. The recommendation is to approve the proposed new district policy 1200 as presented on introduction and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Mr. Kramer, would you like to do this? So this is a recent response to recent legislation over this past legislative session in regards to some of the information, especially from recent legal cases coming out of the state of Wyoming, and for clarification. What it encapsulates a lot of policies that are already in place, but then also kind of goes into some further specific situations. And so you can read very significantly what those definitions of actual knowledge as soon as practicable, health screening tools, instruction, gender identity, sexual orientation. What it really comes down to is there were districts in the state that had practices within their system that if conversations involved teachers or counselors and students, that there may have been situations where communication was not including parents. And so really what this comes down to, and has been the practice at Goshen County School District even before this policy is, and our viewpoint is to include parents with any student concerns, any information. Now it will refine some of the survey pieces too that we're putting out there that will have active participation. It will also talk a little bit about the mental health aspects also and the importance of that communication and information. There will be an additional form that will be added in our registration process of informing parents of their rights to have, if they feel that any of these pieces were not followed by the district, an opportunity then to have a hearing or appeal for the procedures that were part of the district. It is also still being, there's still lots of conversations exactly how this looks at the district level, because you can see in reading it, lawyers were extremely heavily involved in the language, and sometimes that leaves it a little bit open on where exactly and what processes are in place to reflect that. And so superintendents across the state, along with Education Director Degenfeld are having conversations around what does that look like within your specifics, district, boots on the ground, how does this translate?
I think there's generally in the section 3 parental notification consent instruction. Out there that says described in the section.
Can you tell me which page again? I'm sorry.
It's section 3,
Okay.
3 or 4,
Mhm.
parental notification consent instruction. The end of that paragraph where it says described in the section.
Yes, thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving new district policy 1200 parental rights as presented on introduction and first reading, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter N, consider approval of proposed revisions to district policy 9371, board hearings, appeal procedures, rules of practice governing hearings in contested cases before the Board of Trustees is presented on first reading. The recommendation is to approve the proposed revisions to district policy 9371 as presented on first reading. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving revisions to district policy 9371 as presented on first reading, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter O, consider approval of contracting with Renaissance Learning for the 24-25 school year. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Renaissance Learning for STAR and accelerated reading licenses for the 24-25 school year in the total amount of $26,967.37. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving contracting with Renaissance Learning for the 24-25 school year in the total amount of $26,967.37, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter P, consider approval of contracting for professional development services with the Writing Revolution. The recommendation is to approve contracting with the Writing Revolution for additional professional development services during July and August 2024 for teachers and principals in the total amount of $17,304. This is funded through Title I and Y-Bill Literacy Grant. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Does this include any AI? Or what we actually?
So there are some, this is how to incorporate this in multiple curricular areas, but it is, they will be a lot of discussion as we continue to work through how that AI can support some of our writing and how it can be used as a tool. It's very similar, almost in when we had those conversations back when I was in school, spell checker. You know, is that considered cheap? And some of that aspect of where we're starting to get into those conversations, what percentage of your speech is in that writing, and where does it cross that line? It's a little bit blurred right now, and there's those conversations. The thing that I appreciate with some of the AI tools out there is the hardest part when teaching writing was having kids find a way to get started. And it really allows kids to have some thought process around it, and it can be a useful tool. It's also one of those tools, as we've seen with the calculator and all those tools that we found, how do we properly use it to support the education of our kids and not overtake some of the learning aspects of it. But they'll touch on it. I haven't been through it. Kevin, I don't know if there's specific language in there that I'm aware of, but as we continue to talk about reading across the curriculum, it's going to come up regularly. And it comes up and other districts. I think it's really important that we kind of analyze what tools are really useful, because it's the same way, and again, I'm gonna go back to that calculator conversation. There used to be a time in which, no, absolutely can't use a calculator. Now, every one of us carries a pretty heavy computer along with us regularly to support some of our learning and how to join into that. Sure, go ahead. I think it's good.
So to answer your question, trustee Hurley, like it's essentially a writing framework. It's like the lower grades, like the K, probably through second grade, third grade. It's really on the formation of really strong and powerful sentences. As that progresses in age, that turns into like paragraphs and transitioning from paragraph to paragraph. The high school version of that is like argumentative and informational text, like, like research paper type of things. It's like it progresses in age, but it's a framework, so it really works well across not only ELA and like our foundational classes, like the lower grades, but also in the science, social studies, and things like that. So we have a multitude of teachers wanting to take that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving contracting for professional development services with the Writing Revolution in the total amount of $17,304, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter Q, consider approval of contracting with Great Minds for district coaching and professional development. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Great Minds for 4 days of Eureka Math coaching at Lingo Fort Learning Middle Schools in the amount of $15,600 and 10 days of Eureka Math coaching and instructional facilitator support in the amount of $39,000 for the 24-25 school year in the total amount of $54,600. This is funded through ESSER grant and 103A School Improvement Fund. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of contracting with Great Minds for district coaching and professional development in the total amount of $54,600, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter R, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of math materials from Great Minds. The recommendation is to approve the purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of Eureka Math materials in the total amount of $38,579.28. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Will this also be ESSER funded?
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of math materials from Great Minds in the total amount of $38,579.28, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter S, consider approval of contracting with Pearson for Ames Web renewal. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Pearson for Ames Web Plus complete subscriptions for the 24-25 school year in the amount of $6,300. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving contracting with Pearson for Ames Web renewal in the total amount of $6,300, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter T, consider approval of contracting for the 24-25 teletherapy speech services. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Tiny Eye Therapy Services for student speech language services via teletherapy at the rate of $85 per hour, not to exceed $131,750 from August 26, 2024 through May 16, 2025. This is funded through the General Fund Special Education Reimbursement. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of contracting, for teletherapy speech services through Tiny Eye in the total amount, or not to exceed $131,750, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter U, consider approval of contracting for the 24-25 teletherapy speech services. The recommendation is to approve special education contract with Clover Therapy Services LLC from August 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025 for district teletherapy services, on-site visits, and travel expenses not to exceed $105,000. This is funded through the general fund special reimbursable special education. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving contracting for 24-25 teletherapy speech services through Clover Therapy Services LLC, not to exceed $105,000, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter B, consider approval of contracting with Brooke Carson LLC for autism and behavior consulting services for the 24-25 school year. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Brooke Carson LLC for autism and behavior consulting services for July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, not to exceed $65,000. This is funded through IDEA 6B funds. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Is this on-site or is this a tele?
So this is on-site training.
All those in favor of contracting with Brooke Carson LLC for autism and behavior consulting services for the 24-25 school year, not to exceed $65,000, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter W, consider approval of contract with ESU 13 Meridian School for student placement services. The recommendation is to approve special education contract with ESU 13 for day program services for student number 0681 in the Meridian School for the 24-25 school year, not to exceed $65,313, with additional occupational therapy services at $101 per hour and speech language services at $89 per hour. This is funded through the general fund reimbursable special education. Do I have a motion? Is there a second? Any discussion?
What distinguishes between the idea funding and the reimbursable special?
Anything that goes through general fund reimbursable special education should be specifically tied to an IEP. Whereas the IDA 60 money is money that we receive for special education students and services. However, it's not, the 60 is not going directly to student expenses. The 60 is intended more for professional development, professional services, or there's money in there for staff. So really, to me, the difference is that the general fund reimbursable special ed is if an auditor were to come in and I had to produce documents, they want to see the correlation to an IEP.
And then this includes transportation.
Correct. I guess clarification on that, Marcy, I add to that. It includes for the student, but the funding stream is a little bit different, and I'll let Marcy talk to that.
Exactly. This is just the funding for the time while they're in Scottsbluff. We through general fund reimbursable transportation to provide transportation to and from, and that's a bus driver and that's a parent.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of contracting with ESU 13 Meridian School for student placement services for student number 0681, with an amount not to exceed $65,313, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter X, consider approval of contracting for staff and student mental health teletherapy services for the 24-25. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Talkspace for district staff and student teletherapy mental health services for the 24-25 year in the amount of $88,000. This is funded by the Project Aware grant. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm just going to speak to this just real quick, because it is very unique in this aspect, that this is a staff service also available to our staff, the teletherapy. Carlos, we've been talking about this for a number of years, and this funding stream allows us to provide this for our staff and students. So there are we have some fantastic programs within our community, but sometimes that isn't always the best avenue for all of our kids or for our staff. And so by offering this, we're wanting to address some of the mental health needs of both of those groups via teletherapy, and we're able to offer that. One of the pieces in this is, of course, it is grant funded. So it does have a deadline, but we will be evaluating this based on usage also. It allows us to evaluate that. It's a service that is being heavily utilized by our students and staff. And so therefore, it begs the question of, do we need to find other grants to support this when this grant expires, or do we need to find other funding opportunities? But I appreciate Trina's work on this and Christina on finding something that kind of fills that gap and see if it addresses a need for our staff and students.
When is the project where grant ends up?
So it ends actually December of this year, but we're able to enter into contracts that go through the full school year, but the funding will end in December. And that has been a conversation. Actually, that was just a conversation. I had 2 different meetings with State Superintendent Degenfelder, with other superintendents on Monday, talking about the need for funding for these type of programs. And we were kind of late on the Project Aware grant, and so we only had it in place fully for the last 2 years, where there have been other districts that have been part of that in other parts of Wyoming for the last 5 years. And so that's something that they kind of looked at. Again, we're in a unique circumstance because a lot more of our communities outside of Goshen County don't have as many local services available, but it's allowed us to really encapsulate and collaborate with those providers locally, in addition to teletherapy if needed.
Was Project Aware a state grant?
So it was a goal actually to fully apply for that for the federal grant, but it became Project Aware through the ESSER fund at the state level, and that's how they dispersed it.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of contracting for staff and student mental health teletherapy services for the 24-25 school year with Talkspace in the amount of $88,000, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter Y, consider approval of contracting with Qualtrics for the 24-25 survey services. The recommendation is to approve contracting with Qualtrics for survey services from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, and the total amount of $27,500. This is funded through ESSER funds. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of contracting with Qualtrics for the 24-25 survey services in the total amount of $27,500, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter Z, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for cybersecurity training license. The recommendation is to approve the purchase of Mingeo Prodigy Plus licensing for staff cybersecurity training in the amount of $11,430.72. This is funded through the technology budget. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of Video Prodigy Plus licensing in the total amount of $11,430.72, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter AA, consider approval of the purchase exceeding $5,000 for the renewal of District Microsoft licensing. The recommendation is to approve the renewal of District Microsoft licensing from SHI from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, in the total amount of $40,845.96. This is funded through the technology fund. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of renewing District Microsoft licensing in the total amount of $40,845.96, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter B, consider approval of purchase exceeding $5,000 for the purchase of student Chromebooks. The recommendation is to approve the purchase of 355 Chromebooks from Dell Technologies for district students in the total amount of $158,653.20. This is funded through ESSER funds. Do I have a motion?
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So what happens to?
Build devices. Mike, do you want to kind of address what our rotation piece is and what happens to our old devices there?
Yeah, so, we basically have a lifespan of about 5 years on the computer. That's kind of the useful lifespan. So, as they approach that 5th year, we actually extended another year. It's not through warranty or anything, so if it dies, it dies. And then we have a company that's part of it for, e-waste recycling. So, we take them to the fair, they come pick them up. And take them.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of 355 Chromebooks from Dell Technologies in the total amount of $158,653.20, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter C, consider approval of renewing the 24-25 district property liability and vehicle insurance premium with school risk retention program. The recommendation is to approve the renewal of district policy liability and vehicle insurance premiums from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025 with school risk retention program in the total amount of $750,952. This is funded through the general fund. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
How much of an increase is this? My insurance went up 18%, so is that equivalent?
Trustees, this really is a pleasant surprise in that, this was an 8% increase, which this is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But, the preliminary budget that was presented to you had a 20% increase. So, seeing that, the renewal actually was less than the preliminary budget, there's room for reallocation in the final budget.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of renewing the 24-25 district property liability and vehicle insurance premium with school risk retention program in the total amount of $750,952, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter D, consider approval of authorizing district business manager to pay fiscal year-end bills by June 30th, 2024. The recommendation is to approve authorizing the district business manager to make payment of all fiscal year-end bills no later than June 30th, with information presented at the July 9th regular board meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving, authorizing the district business manager to pay fiscal year-end bills by June 30th, 2024, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter double E, consider approval of offering a contract for halftime district gifted and talented coordinator. The recommendation is to approve offering a contract with Lacey Krakow as a halftime district gifted and talented coordinator for the 24-25 school year. Do I have a motion?
I so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of offering a contract for halftime district gifted and talented coordinator to Lacey Krakow, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter double F, consider approval of offering a contract for district work-based learning coordinator. The recommendation is to approve offering a contract to Kim Russell as a district work-based learning coordinator for the 24-25 school year pending certification. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving offering a contract for district work-based learning coordinator to Kim Russell, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter double G, consider approval of math pilot for Algebra 1 at Lingo Fort Laramie High School. The recommendation is to approve piloting Algebra 1 for Eureka Math at Lingo Fort Laramie High School for the 24-25 school year, and the purchase of teacher and student curricular materials from Great Minds in the amount of $1,139.40. This is funded through ESSER funds. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the purchase of math pilot for Algebra 1 at Lingo Fort Laramie High School and the total amount of $1,139.40, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Item carries. Letter F, topics for discussion.
Handing out to the board members is the self-evaluation. That is a semi-annual self-evaluation for the board to take a look at. Trustees are asked to evaluate themselves on the self-evaluation and then also as a group. And what I thought we kind of do is just go down through the standards. If you want to go over them and kind of have a short discussion on each one, that would allow some conversation to be had.
Okay, number one was values and ethical behavior. Letter A, place student needs first. Letter B, demonstrate commitment to equity and high standards of achievement for each student. Letter C, commits to treating each individual with dignity and respect. Letter D, models high ethical standards. And letter E, advocates for public education.
Should have asked if you wanted me to read these, since you don't want reading this evening.
I'm doing pretty good. There was one, comment down at the bottom here, board member made, it said, unfortunately, there still is a disconnect between board behavior and our board governance.
I think overall, as a board, it does seem that the majority of the ratings were above, sometimes, often, or always in there. I think that one of the biggest pieces there is the communication with the board and board members and how that kind of continually is important to maintain that commitment to each other and also that communication and where you're thinking. And I think those have been things that the board has identified in the past too, as we continually get better at that and have those open communication items and conversations and understanding perspectives too, because I think that's an important piece that every board member, considering it's a 9-member board, has a unique perspective to every item that comes across there. And it is actually surprising how many unanimous votes there are when you think of the amount of things that you're asked to define and make determinations on, and then have conversations around those. I think a lot of this too, as we continue to work through the process of strategic planning, again, always reviewing, always having those conversations.
Any comments on values and ethical behavior? Okay. Number 2 was leadership. Letter A, contributes to thoughtful governance, discussions, and decisions by being well-informed, open-minded, and deliberative. Letter B, understands that authority rests with the board as a whole and not with individual board members. Letter C, is able to articulate and model appropriate board member roles and responsibilities. Letter D, actively participates in board member duties and responsibilities. Letter E, demonstrates group membership and leadership skills working within the board structure. Letter F, respects the board's role in policy making and supports all adopted board policy. There's one comment left. It says, I would like to see more participation, discussion, and unity from this board.
One of the things that I see on this is just trying to figure out where that collective lies, and then also in those board work sessions. It's really hard to find dates for 9 members to be able to attend. That is tricky, but I think when we get to those leadership and those work sessions, it's really important, just as important as the regular meeting for attendance, to have those same things to be effective as a board, and to have those conversations, and policy making and leadership skills. And I think it's important to try to find ways, and this is something I struggle with, is trying to articulate perspective in a large group setting, but also in a way that is not trying to create or stir conflict, but trying to share those perspectives in a way that's also, knowing that there's other perspectives out there.
And I think I appreciate the fact that, I think for the most part, we try to actually accommodate things forever. However, knowing from the position that it's a time environment, we have to prepare ourselves to be able to know we have to expect time. Fortunately, when I look at the ratings, I do see the numbers that are low, that I guess I would appreciate, whether the numbers low or high, I would like to know the thoughts. Comment.
Anybody else have anything to say about leadership? Okay. Number 3 is communication. Letter A, builds and maintains positive connections with community and staff. Letter B, communicates accurately and honestly with awareness of the impact of his or her words and actions. Letter C, listens carefully with an open mind. Letter D, maintains civility and treats all people with respect. Letter E, maintains confidentiality of appropriate matters. Letter F refers and guides people with concerns to appropriate staff. Letter G welcomes parents, student, and community input. Indicators for evaluation comments, and there's one comment, this section was missed by a board member, and E is a reflection of the Rollins issue. How do we trust the boards with confidential information if we are not all committed to the same standards?
This goes back to the first one too, where I was talking about, having that communication piece. We talked about this in my evaluation too, and I think it's just collective around all between superintendent, board members. How does that communication, in a way, bring those ideas and questions to the forefront to be able to maintain that trust, and where that is a working relationship. And it goes back to number one, which is the very first statement on there. Places students' needs first. That's the one. There's a reason they put that one in. And how do we kind of evaluate ourselves and as a board, and myself as a superintendent, how we can do that 1A to be the most effective piece that we can be through those meetings or even in our conversations.
Well, I have to say that I'm skeptical of this study. And I say that fact that unless we are truly committed to having an introspective look, not only at ourselves, but as a board, to be able to make changes, unless we're truly committed. The feedback that is given is new. And, I'm gonna be very frank with you, with it being, only a few months before there's gonna be turnover. Although I appreciate the opportunity to be able to actually, evaluate us. I have to say, again, I'm skeptical in with this, unless there's true commitment. Okay.
I'll move to professional development. Letter A commits the time and energy necessary to be informed and competent. Letter B keeps abreast of current issues, research, applicable laws, regulations, and policies that affect public education. And letter C participates in professional development, individual and with board superintendent meeting. There's one comment down here. I'm disappointed with board participation in committees and strategic planning. I know everyone is busy, but how do we make the best decisions without putting in the time?
I think for me, in that professional development piece, again, talking about the work sessions and things, but I do want to just bring to light that 4C, individual and with the board and superintendent team, just to shed light on the administrative team and things that we have. As an administrative team with my principals, and there is regular disagreement. There's regularly different perspectives being brought, and it is not a collective. Everybody is thinking along the same frame of mind, but it is, again, that team aspect. It's that board superintendent team where there's going to be many a times where board or superintendent have disagreements or see different perspectives of it, but that doesn't mean that, again, we're not putting ourselves back to that 1A, best for students, and how can we commit to that, but then also have that commitment to moving forward, because we've had very difficult decisions that you guys have made over the years. But I also even think that when there's a split votes, it's the important commitment of the board of where we move forward, what's the next piece that we have to make a decision on, because we all know every month you're being asked to make a pretty heavy decision, no matter what you're showing up, and how can we do that as a team? It is the biggest question. And for the most part, when you look at those ratings, you know, they do actually align pretty well, individual and board, on that area, which in some of our areas, we've kind of separated on individual and board. But I think that's very good self-reflection for many of our board members in regards to where we put ourselves on that specific professional development topic.
But I would have to ask that going into those conversations, it's not, the mindset isn't who's right or wrong. It's what are we doing in the best interest of the whole? And I guess that's where, growth comes into actually get it, discussion.
I think too, if you've been able to walk away from many of your decisions and saying that you 100% got it right, I can't say that I regularly do that on a lot of my decisions and say, you know, this is tough. It is tough when you have that information, you have to make a decision, and you're not always as confident as you'd like to be in some of those decisions too. And that's a regular occurrence of the board.
Okay, number 5, accountability. Letter A is accountable to the community. Letter B takes personal responsibility for his or her own words and actions. Letter C respects and abides by board decisions. Letter D meets expectations for transparency, including disclosing potential conflicts of interest and refraining from discussing or voting on those issues. Letter E complies with board policies, procedures, and the law. There's one comment: we all have different beliefs and opinions, but as a whole, our abilities to work together and stand by decisions is severely lacking.
I think again, that goes back to all of that. Say it's just actually a theme, you know, the communication, all of those things that really align with that ability to work together, created as a team, and then stand together with that decision, even though it might have not gone as a whole the way that you might have expected it to go or feel individually.
Anything else on our self-evaluation? Okay. I just have one other really quick thing. The public officer training mandated by the state is due July. June 30th, it's due. So if you have not done the state mandated public officer training, you might get on. That's it. Letter G. Future meetings, the next regular board meeting will be Tuesday, July 9th, 2024 at 7 p.m. Number 2, the annual district budget hearing will be conducted on Wednesday, July 17th at 7 p.m. Number 3, the 2024 WSDA Fall Regional Meeting will be on Tuesday, August 27th at Converse County School District in Douglas. That's it with that.
I'll just kind of echo on that number 3 from that future dates. That is pretty valuable. That's a great time for you to have an opportunity to talk with other board members in just an evening and get some information, especially financial information on education at the state level. Really assist there. So I would really encourage. I've gone to it the last 4 years. I think it's very interesting and again, allows you to create those relationships with other board members to have those conversations, which are many of you as board members are facing the exact same challenges in multiple districts. The other piece that I have then is the update on staffing and in-district transfers. I'm just gonna share my screen here. As you can see, a large majority of ours are now being filled. We do have, of course, some of these positions that we're still advertising, but we've accommodated through the last year. This is the second year in a row we've been able to not fill those two positions. Again, highlighted in yellow are ones that were approved tonight. And then also, these open positions were ones that either were resignations from this meeting or are still open. And so we still have a number that are still open, but we do have plans for a number of those. I'm going to switch over and share my other screen. Student enrollment. So this column right here is our current. This was the previous month. You can see it's very comparable, April to May. This is the previous year's May and so on. We are down from the last year, but you can see that we are still up. One of the biggest components of the school funding model is the 3-year average. So as we're kind of still above the previous 2 years, we're still seeing funding in the positive on our student enrollment. And so we'll still be watching very closely in regards to that kindergarten number that we see coming in. You can see the other piece that our senior class at a number of these is a little bit lower across the district. So we will not be losing as many seniors as we did the year previous as they go off. And even though Chair Sussex stole my thunder, the public officer training that is on my list too, to remind you, it is due by June 30th, 2024. So if you have not had an opportunity to do that, please do so before the June 30th deadline. Also, an update on the 23-24 student drug testing. You can find that on page 164 of your packet. I am just going to share additional stats with that and some changes that were made. You'll notice that this was a positivity rate of 2.96. Our positive rate last year was 0.9. The interesting part of this is last year we did change. So I think last year was kind of an anomaly. What we had done, we had kind of been staying with the same numbers at Lingle and Southeast. It was not reflective on our student enrollment. And so it was really involved in the number of tests, even though we've had over the previous 10 years some decline. And so we were testing at a much higher rate. And so I think that accounted for some, and then by going down in those areas, it kind of affected this year, our number going up. So we didn't test as many within some of the systems and schools where there was a lower rate. You'll see though, the positive piece is there, the national average this year is 4.3%. We're still significantly lower than that. If we go back and see that comparability, it does kind of more align with where we were at in 2021. 2021, we were at 2.8%. Previous years have been that post-COVID had kind of seen a lull in some of those things. And it's something to definitely watch out for and watch closely. The other aspect of that, when we're talking on that low percentage, we're still talking 10 positive tests out of a total, total amount of tests of 337 tests. So there were 10 positive out of 337.
So like announcement under the grade. The grades are like not diverse. So there's a reason for that.
I just want to check my previous year's report to see if that was just something that they don't know why that is, but that's been on previous years also. So yeah, I was thinking it was going to be something that was unique, but on the 2022, yeah, it was. The numbers, and it actually, I think I'm gonna have to ask him what quantifier he uses, because in 2022-23 report, grade 9 is the first, and then grade 11, then grade 10. I'm wondering if that has to do with the percentages of the total students that isn't there that are tested. And so that might be the order for it, because it does look like in previous years, that number moves. And so I think there's a quantifier for that, but I'll have to find out. And then just on page 166, this is just information. We're still utilizing K&K Insurance as the provider of optional student accident insurance for a number of years. WEP serves as the agent, and we plan to continue with them for this 24-25 school year. That's everything that I have. Thanks. Back to